You have beautiful eyes. That's all I remembered before I felt nothing but pain and relief from the grinding blades of the Pegasus device, while the Pegasus that I had admired for all of my life laughed at me in the hour of her bittersweet victory. I was nothing but trash to her, a nuisance, a pawn in her game of murdering innocent Pegasi just because they failed at a flying test. I never thought this could happen, nor that the Pegasus who had accepted me as her sister could dispose of me without shedding a single tear. I thought she loved me, but apparently I was mistaken. After the sound of my own flesh and bone grinding had subsided, I remembered falling into a darkness. My only thought was that I was going to be stuck in that factory as one of the many innocent victims who had met their fate through the Pegasus device. But this darkness was not anything like the factory itself. It was always quiet, and I was the only pony there. I was alone for eternity. At least, that's what I thought, until I heard a faint cry within the dark void I had ventured through for countless years. I had found another pony, another victim. Something was different about her. Her wings were missing. Something I found both sad and humiliating. I didn't know whether or not to approach her, even though I was dead and I couldn't be killed again. I knew that her wings had been removed by some sort of saw due to the consistency of the two severed limbs on her back. They were cut neatly and still swollen. Some pony had removed her of what makes her a Pegasus, a heinous act that should never be performed. I was angry, sad, and lost. I hadn't seen some pony in years, and if anything, neither had she. She needed some pony in this place, this void of darkness that I couldn't explain. I decided to approach the young Pegasus, and as I did, she became aware of my presence. "Who's there?" asked the Pegasus. "Hey, it's all right. I'm lost, just like you." I spoke. She turned toward me, her eyes full of tears. She hesitated to say a word to me, seeing I was only a stranger to her. "How can I trust you? For all I know, you could be an orchestrator here to laugh at me, all because I have no wings," snapped the Pegasus. I didn't know how to act. She still thought she was in the factory, left to die in some part of the large building. How had she gone? I wondered. Had she met her fate through the Pegasus device? Or had she met her end in a much worse way? She couldn't have flown to save herself from the guards. Had she been tased to death? Committed suicide somehow? All of these options reminded me of my time in the factory. I was so close to escaping the factory that I could taste it, but I was outsmarted by a Pegasus I didn't even recognize anymore. She was only a monster to me now. I'm no orchestrator. I'm just a Pegasus. I met my end through the demented machine you and I both know as the Pegasus device. A machine designed to extract spectra to create rainbows. The young Pegasus calmed herself, looking at me differently. I was prepared for anything she planned to do. "If you died through that machine, then why do you still have your wings? When I was forced into the factory, I was taken as one of the weaker Pegasi, and my wings were cut off by one of the orchestrators. The one thing that makes me a Pegasus was taken from me and tossed aside like garbage, and broadcasted for every pony to see. I was humiliated." The thought of a Pegasus's wings being cut off against a Pegasus's will made a chill run down my spine. Had Rainbow Dash truly gone so low to do something so horrid? Rainbow Dash used to be a legend, but now I saw her as nothing but a ruthless monster. Going so low to remove the wings of Pegasi seemed a bit extreme, but after seeing her true colors in my final moments of life, nothing would surprise me. At the time I was taken to the factory, cutting wings off was a necessity, so I got to keep mine. However, in the time I was in the factory, I lost some pony I loved and cared for. He was taken from me by Rainbow Dash, all because I failed to pass the flying exam after teaching me everything that she knew. Every pony makes mistakes, and just because I made one tiny mistake, I lost the one I loved through greed and selfishness. I hate her. My anger had startled the young Pegasus, and I was surprised at just how angry I had gotten. It was as if I had released all of my hate for the monster I once knew as a sister in one sentence. I did hate her. She was a horrible Pegasus that I wished I could inflict the same pain I felt in my final moments tenfold. I was dead, though. I would never get that chance. As much as I wanted to kill her, I had to accept that I had lost that opportunity. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. It's just that the Pegasus you know as the factory's ruthless leader used to be some pony I was very close to, till I saw her true colors. The young Pegasus looked at me with a surprised look. She wiped away her tears, turning to me. Wait, you were close to her? Closer than you can imagine. We were practically sisters. Before you think I had anything to do with that goddamn factory, I never knew until I was taken there. I tried to convince her what she was doing wasn't right. She didn't care. She didn't even show any emotion when I attempted to convince her. So it's clear that she will never give up her madness. If only the other Pegasi in Cloudsdale knew that the Pegasus they all look up to is only out to kill them. From the expression on the Pegasus's face, I could tell she could care less about anything I was telling her. If anything, I was only making myself seem as if I were Rainbow Dash's right hoof mare, even though I wasn't. I decided to continue onward, since I wasn't getting anywhere with this victim of the Rainbow Factory. I was only wasting my breath and effort. I took 2 steps from her, up until she spoke out and said something that I wasn't expecting her to say. I'm sorry. She confessed to me. Her voice was innocent as I turned to face her once more. For what? You were close to her, and she played you for a fool. I shrugged my shoulders, speaking back to her, holding back as much anger as possible. No need to be. Doesn't matter anymore anyways. I'm dead. That dirty mare lives on killing innocent Pegasi, while we wander through this endless darkness after death. I wish I could have stopped her, but I was too weak. She outsmarted me, and made me pay the ultimate price. The young Pegasus put her hoof to her chin as I stood in confusion. What could she be thinking in such a depressing place? She turned back to me and asked me an unlikely question. Let me ask, if you had a second chance to go back, would you? I paused, wondering how to answer her question. The obvious answer was yes, but I had already said enough. She could have been setting me up, seeing I had claimed I was once close to Rainbow Dash. I just decided to be honest, because what's the worst she could do? I would. to take down Rainbow Dash for good. But that's impossible. There's no second chances here, Billy. I answered roughly. Nothing's impossible. I know some pony who might be able to give you a second chance at destroying Rainbow Dash. My ears perked. I was immediately intrigued at the sound of the Pegasus's words. I wasn't sure to believe her about such an impossible opportunity. One that I wanted. One that I needed. Who? His name is unknown, seeing he forgot his name in his years of working in the Rainbow Factory. He has been waiting for some pony like you to come along to take out that factory, but he needed a strong Pegasus. I wondered who this Pegasus could have been, but at the same time, I didn't care. If I could have another chance to destroy the Rainbow Factory and its ruthless leader, I'd take it. What surprised me the most, though, was the fact that this Pegasus had worked in the factory, but he had somehow ended up here. Had he rebelled against Rainbow Dash, died in some sort of factory accident, or had he eventually met his fate as I had? Speaking of names, I never caught yours. My name is Crystal. What's yours? It's Scootaloo. She paused. Her eyes bulged. You were the leader of the first assault against the factory workers. You were the first pony to ever get into Rainbow Dash's head. Your death weakened her. I was surprised. How could she know this? My assault against Rainbow Dash was before she was admitted into the factory, and by then, I was already being presented as a rainbow. How do you know that? The Pegasus I mentioned before told me about it. My death had gotten into Rainbow Dash's head? It sure didn't seem like she cared the slightest when I was fed into that machine. All she did was laugh. With that information, I knew that the key to escaping that factory of nightmares was to kill Rainbow Dash. And since I had known Rainbow Dash more than any pony, I knew how to do it. This was my chance. My chance to end her game of madness. All I had to do was push her both mentally and physically. If this Pegasus can give me one chance at Rainbow Dash, I promise to destroy her, along with the factory itself. Rainbow Dash looks at herself as a god. If I can have another chance at life, I'll prove otherwise. She isn't a god. She's just another Pegasus that needs to be taken out. If any pony can destroy her, it's me. Crystal could see clearly that everything I said wasn't just to intimidate her. Everything I said was true. I no longer had any sort of love for Rainbow Dash, only hate and disgust. And my only wish for the Pegasus I once knew was for her to die the same way I did, with no mercy spared. Crystal knew that as she nodded her head and stood back on all hooves. Follow me, and I'll take you to him, she stated. I didn't smile or make any sort of grin at the sound of Crystal's words. Instead, I just proceeded to following her deeper into the void of darkness. It seemed as if I had been walking for hours when Crystal finally came to a stop. My hooves were weak as I planted my back end on the ground, fear and hatred penetrating my mind. I had no idea what was coming next, nor who this Pegasus was that Crystal had spoke of. I knew I couldn't die, but I could still feel pain, even if I was dead. Wait here, commanded Crystal, taking a few steps forward. I nodded my head as a response, even though my instincts were telling me to run. I ignored my instincts despite my fear. If there was any sort of possibility to return to that factory and destroy everything that Rainbow Dash had managed to create, I couldn't refuse that opportunity. The factory had existed for millennia, killing and poisoning the minds of innocent Pegasi. Its existence was futile. I had to destroy it, along with its ungrateful leader. I couldn't let another Pegasus die over greed and selfishness. I watched as a tall Pegasus stepped out of the darkness. His coat was gray and his mane was yellow, much like a Pegasus that I had met when I still had a life in Ponyville. Her name escapes me due to my mind being ridden of all memories outside of the factory, along with all the countless years I had spent there. This endless darkness had slowly corrupted my mind, coating it with some sort of fog that had changed me. I wasn't the pony I was before. If anything, I was just an empty shell. Crystal gave me a signal to step closer, now that she and the other Pegasus had finished their discussion. Once again, my instincts erupted, telling me to run, but I ignored them, stepping closer. Standing next to the much bolder Pegasus made me feel uncomfortable. He clearly was much more powerful in both strength and wits. I could see that he had been in the factory for a long time just by his stare. It was intimidating, causing me to hesitate and wonder just how long this Pegasus had been in the factory. He continued to stare at me, sending a chill down my spine. "So, you're the Pegasus that stood up against the mare that we both used to admire?" he asked me. Once again, I nodded my head as a response. We were both equals, yet I still felt weak next to him. "I admire your bravery. You were the first Pegasus to make Rainbow Dash worry that some pony was going to escape the factory. She admitted it to me not too long after you were put through the Pegasus device. Unfortunately, your efforts led to a grim requirement. Something she entrusted me to do, which was cutting off the wings of every newly admitted Pegasus. That's what made me finally gain enough courage to try and escape the hell I was stuck in. Yet, I was outsmarted, just like you." I was shocked. I really had gotten into Rainbow Dash's head. I had pushed her to a point where I thought she'd never go. Her wings were part of her destiny, and just because of my near escape, she had enforced that all Pegasi who were admitted into the factory shall have their wings cut off. I truly was Rainbow Dash's greatest adversary. How did she get you? The Pegasus let out a long sigh before answering. She knew of my plans to escape long before I finally decided to escape. The only exit to the roof of the factory was sealed off without me knowing, and despite putting a nasty impression on her head, she had thought ahead. The only exit turned out to be a death trap, and foolishly, I, along with another young Pegasus named Starlight Spark, died of lack of oxygen. I was doomed from the start. Anger was all I felt at the sound of the Pegasus's words. I had heard enough. "If you can give me one shot at Rainbow Dash, I promise that I'll make her pay," I stated, my voice low and raspy. "I know you can. You are much bolder than me. Otherwise, I would have went back myself. As much as I hate that bitch, I could never come as close as you did. I was there when you nearly escaped, and even though I was a factory worker, I truly wanted to see you escape. Maybe then I could have gotten out of that factory much sooner and avoided all of the terrible things I was forced to do. All because of Rainbow Dash." His words surprised me. He truly had been in the factory for a long time. He had seen and done horrible things to survive, including cutting off the wings of Crystal, and unlike the other workers, he cared for the helpless victims that he had to kill and torture by force. One chance. That's all I need. I will finish her. The Pegasus could see I wasn't kidding, so he nodded his head. One chance. Once you get the chance, Don't hesitate. Kill her. I nodded my head. At long last, after all these years, I finally was going to get my chance. I had one chance to finish the factory and Rainbow Dash both. That's all I needed. Suddenly, I felt a surge enter me as I was transported to the roof of the weather factory. A strong wind blew through my mane as I felt raindrops collide against my skin. The sky visible from the roof of the weather factory was only an overcast of black and gray clouds along with lightning strikes. A thought of pure horror plagued my mind as I realized what would follow the storm. A rainbow composed of innocent Pegasi that had died through the Pegasus device would form in place of the storm. The thought made my stomach turn as I admired my surroundings. The roof was long, wide, and open, with one lone entrance on the far right side of the roof. Surprisingly, the roof wasn't barricaded by any barbed wire or an electric fence. It was completely open. Any factory worker could jump from this horrible place if they wanted. They could escape a horrible life of murder and torture, but most of the Pegasi were either too afraid or driven to madness by Rainbow Dash's tactics. They'd be stuck here for the rest of their lives killing innocent Pegasi, driven to where murder was only second nature to them. The rain continued to pound against my skin, so I decided to find some cover. I scoured the area for any sort of cover, but of course, there wasn't a single spot where I could escape the rain. There was only one way I could get out of the rain, and as much as I didn't want to, I knew I had to do it. I had to return to the inside of the factory, the place I had died in, along with Aurora and Orion. The screams of them in their final moments still plagued my mind, especially Orion's pleas as his ribs were snapped and he was thrown into the Pegasus device like a piece of trash. Those thoughts had caused tears to form in my eyes as I became surprised. I had not felt sadness for years, nor had I not cried ever since Orion's death. The warm tears rolled down my cheeks as I wiped them away. Was I truly alive again? I decided to check by placing my right hoof against the left side of my chest, only to feel a beating drum within my chest. My heart was beating again, pumping blood throughout my body. I truly was alive again, and this time, I would not fail to avenge my fallen friends. This time, Rainbow Dash would be outsmarted. She wasn't going to win again. Before I could do anything in my quest for vengeance, I had to find a way to blend in. My best option was to disguise myself in a full bodysuit, otherwise Rainbow Dash would have her entire security squad on me. I couldn't be seen. She couldn't know I was here. The factory was packed with surveillance cameras, along with a strange darkness that you couldn't see. It was much like the same darkness in the void, but much more powerful. I would have to be absolutely careful and remain hidden like a ghost. Once I would be able to blend in, I could get to work on sabotaging the empire Rainbow Dash had created. I carefully examined the area for any security cameras, and fortunately didn't see any, as I carefully stepped toward the right entrance on the far right side of the roof. My mane and coat were soaked by the time I reached the door, where a green light shone through my blurred vision due to the rain. The green light glowed from just above the entrance, illuminating a neon sign that read "Exit." I took a close look at the door, only to quickly realize that it was one of those doors that required a certain code to open. I wanted to cuss in frustration, until I suddenly heard a beeping noise erupt from the other side of the door. I wasted no time and quickly rushed to hide from whoever was on the other side of the entrance. The door opened, revealing a female Pegasus dressed in a pitch-black suit, with only her tail, wings, and face visible. It was just like the one Rainbow Dash was wearing the day I was admitted into the factory. Could this have been one of the orchestrators that Crystal mentioned? The Pegasus walked right out to the edge of the roof, mumbling to herself. She was gripping something in her hoof as she stuck it in her mouth. I hate taking these things, but it's the only way to escape the horrible shit I'm forced to do. She spoke to herself. I wondered what to do, seeing she wasn't even aware of my presence. I peeked my head around the corner, noticing the door still open. The Pegasus was clearly too busy mumbling to herself, so I took the opportunity, immediately trotting from my hiding spot through the open door and into the factory. Inside the factory, a heaviness came over me as I looked around, fortunately not seeing any other factory workers. I wondered what sort of medication the factory worker had taken. Apparently, it was strong enough to make some pony forget things, due to her stating so. At the same time, I could care less about what sort of medication the factory worker had taken. I had to focus on my task, which was getting to the bottom floor without being seen. I'd have to stick to the shadows, seeing there were cameras everywhere, and the only way I could stay hidden was to stick to the darkness. My current position was a short, narrow hall that led to a longer hall just across from the hall I was in, along with a long skywalk to the left. The entire factory was visible through the glass along the sides of the skywalk, including the Pegasus device. The machine I had died in was silent, but it had recently been used due to the visible blood on the grinding blades of the death machine. Another sign that it had recently been used was the fact that the Spectra storage tubes were full to the top. I was lucky. No factory workers were visible on the factory floor. That's when it hit me. I had no idea what time it was. For all I knew, the factory workers could have departed to wherever they rested for the day. I still wasn't going to take any chances, because I couldn't imagine the cameras being shut off at any time due to all of the rebellious Pegasi that had turned against Rainbow Dash. I still had to stick to my plan, not to mention I had to keep moving, because I knew one factory worker was still awake. The most obvious way to go was across the skywalk and hopefully find an elevator. The darkest spots in the skywalk was the sides of the long walkway, so I'd just have to trot as fast as my hooves could manage. I took a deep breath, sticking to the left side of the skywalk, and with all of my energy, trotted across the skywalk. The hall seemed to drag on for miles, when it really was only my mind playing tricks on me. I was afraid. I hated this place, but it was the only place where I could find the mare I hated the most. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes, because I had just this chance to take out the factory and Rainbow Dash. After what seemed like forever, I finally reached the end of the skywalk, where I met another code-embedded door and another long hallway, where at the end of it, I could see an elevator. This almost seemed too easy. I had not seen any other factory worker except the one female Pegasus I had encountered, and I had no idea where the hell I was going. For all I knew, I could be walking right into a trap, seeing the bold Pegasus that had given me this opportunity had met his end through a set-up trap. Rainbow Dash knew of his plans long before he had planned to do so. I couldn't underestimate Rainbow Dash. Her act as the tomboyish Pegasus that represented loyalty made her seem like she didn't even have the qualifications of her true self. No pony could have ever guessed her to be clever and cunning. Just goes to show you that you truly never know some pony until you've seen their true colors. Rainbow Dash was a murderous Pegasus, and the overmare of a factory of nightmares. The fact that I had admired Rainbow Dash all my life made me want to vomit. I shook my head as I wondered what to do next. My best bet was the elevator, so I wasted no time, stuck to the darkest areas, and trotted down the long hall. Once I reached the end of the hall, I examined the elevator, quickly noticing that it had a hoof scanner, along with an eye scanner. Shit! Now what? Suddenly, I heard hoofsteps from down the hall, immediately causing my heart to drop. I had to hide, fast. As the steps got closer, I decided to hide in a dark corner and hope that I wouldn't be spotted by the factory worker. I placed my hoof over my mouth, silencing my breath, as the female worker came into view, approaching the elevator. An idea came to me through my fear, noticing that once again, the worker didn't notice my presence. With all my bravery, I jumped from my hiding spot, grabbed the Pegasus, and put my hoof over her mouth, thrusting her violently in my grip. Listen up, and listen good. If you don't shut up, I'm going to snap your neck. She continued to struggle in my grip, so to give the worker a sign that I wasn't kidding, I violently smacked her face into the door of the elevator, causing her to cooperate as I pulled her back into my grip. Refuse again, and I'll do worse. Now, here's how it's going to go. You are going to get me into that elevator, take me to the bottom floor, and lastly, take me to where they store the full bodysuits. The worker didn't struggle anymore and nodded her head instead. I quickly forced her in front of the eye and hoof scanners as she cooperated, placing her hoof on the hoof scanner and her eyes against the eye scanner. A series of beeping noises along with a female tone erupted from the two scanners.
Access granted,
spoke the scanner, following the elevator's opening. The inside of the elevator was dimly lit, making my situation much easier, seeing I had to stick to the darkness if I planned to make any sort of progress in this demented factory. I continued to hold the Pegasus tight in my grip as I navigated backwards into the compact elevator. Take us to the bottom floor, I commanded, thrusting the factory worker toward the keypad. She didn't fight me and just did as I had commanded. After pressing a few buttons, the elevator door closed, proceeding to the factory floor. Along the way down, the factory worker turned her head to me, freeing her muzzle from my grip. Kill me. Her words surprised me. I had no idea how to even respond to something like that. What was I supposed to say? Yes? Was she trying to trick me? Or was she being serious? Judging from what she said on the roof, I believed that she was being serious. She had grown tired of this life of murder and wanted out of the Rainbow Factory, forever. She was my only guidance though, so I decided to make a proposition with her. Okay, I'll free you from this place, but first, you have to do something for me. What's your proposition? You know your way around the factory, so here's the deal. Get me a map and keep me out of Rainbow Dash's sight. If you can get me to Rainbow Dash, I'll free you from this hellbent factory. The worker raised an eyebrow at me, following an unsettling look on her face. The best way to get to Rainbow Dash is to gain her trust. It's not easy to gain her trust though. You'll have to do some wicked shit to get on Dash's good side. Only few Pegasi have ever been able to do it, and what they've done to gain her trust is best left unsaid. Without a doubt, I knew that the worker wasn't kidding the slightest. Rainbow Dash was ruthless, and I could only imagine the unspeakable things required to gain her trust. But I planned to gain Rainbow Dash's trust using stealth and manipulation. I had been closer to Rainbow Dash than any pony had ever been. I knew things about her that others didn't. Things that could ruin her and scare her. Trust me, I can gain her trust, but I need time to do it. I don't know what you're planning, but I can buy you time. Can you loosen your grip though? It kind of hurts. Despite what she had stated, I wasn't going to loosen my grip so easily. I knew just how manipulative these factory workers were, and they would play the "I'm just the innocent victim, so trust me" game. I'll release you, but first, dispose of any lethal weapon you have on you. I know you have a taser, gun, and pepper spray as defense against any victims who try to escape. Dispose of them, and I'll release you. She didn't rebel and disposed of all of the lethal weapons she carried on her belt, dropping them to the floor of the elevator. She had disposed of a taser, handgun, pepper spray, knife, and nightstick as the elevator came to a stop on the bottom floor. I carefully released her from my grip as the elevator doors opened. Just outside the doors, I saw the base of the Pegasus device. It was supported by 4 steel bars holding it in place. The sight of the machine caused the memories of my final moments in the factory to flash before my eyes, as I stared at the steel wall next to the machine with rusty chains hanging from the rafters. The chains that my hooves had been restrained in as I was lifted and dropped into the grinding blades of the death machine. Those memories caused my entire body to quiver as I saw the metal platform to the side of the death machine, the place where Rainbow Dash had stood, mocking me, Orion, and Aurora. The machine was quiet now, but it wouldn't be long before it would erupt back to life, hungry for more innocent Pegasi who had failed the flying exam. I did notice something different about the area though. A giant projector screen was positioned just above the control room for the Pegasus device. Suddenly, Crystal's words echoed in my mind. The one thing that makes me a Pegasus was taken from me and tossed aside like garbage, and broadcasted for every pony to see. I was humiliated. That must have been what she meant by that her forced wing removal was broadcasted. What a horrid thing for any Pegasi to see. The thought of being forced to witness a Pegasus being removed of their only identification of being a Pegasus made my stomach turn, nearly causing me to vomit. I remained strong though, as we continued to navigate along the factory floor toward another room. What's in there? It's the locker room for the female factory workers. I can get you a full body suit from an old worker's locker. Don't they still work here? She turned to me, giving me a look that answered my question. Many workers die in factory accidents, especially the workers who have to clean the Pegasus device blades. Once you get stuck in that machine, it's impossible to escape. Or Rainbow Dash does it on purpose just for extra spectra. I claimed, knowing that I was correct. Yeah, that too. She agreed, placing her hoof on the hoof scanner. Once her access was granted, we entered a long, narrow room with 2 rows of lockers on both sides of the room. The worker switched on the lights, closing the door behind her. Rainbow Dash doubled the security of the factory ever since an escape attempt by one of the orchestrators. That's why there's a scanner on every door, so no pony can just simply escape. I immediately knew that the worker was talking about the Pegasus that I had met in the void. He was an orchestrator, but was outsmarted by Rainbow Dash. Did you know this orchestrator? Sorta. He was one of the more quiet orchestrators, but we did work in the same department. Such a shame that he had to die here. I really wish the guy could have escaped, but Dash knew about his plans before he even had a chance. I took his place as Dash's second in command, and ever since, it's been the same old story. Pegasi come into the factory, we give them the same speech, kill the weakest one, and so on. I've wanted out of this place ever since my first kill, but I've been too scared to do anything. Dash watches all the workers like a hawk, and if anything seems out of place, she acts immediately. I once thought about starting a rebellion with the other orchestrators, but I quickly figured out that's like asking for death on a silver platter. This place changes you, and not in a good way. Some workers have committed suicide to escape before they were driven to madness. The eldest worker came here with a heart of gold, and at first refused to kill any pony, but after one kill, along with the effects of the factory, they became a ruthless killer, driven by madness. And who was that? Dash. One kill was all it took to persuade Rainbow Dash to take her role here in the factory? My blood ran cold. How long had Rainbow Dash truly been here? How many other overmares had there been in the factory? Was Rainbow Dash the only one? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a locker door opening as the worker pulled out a full bodysuit. It was coated with dry blood, along with some splats of spectra from the tubes around the chest area. Here, put this on, she commanded, tossing the suit at me. I grabbed the suit and quickly slipped it on. It was clear what this suit was used for. It was for handling any toxic chemicals and working around any toxic gases. My guess was the factory worker handled spectra and organized it. Make sure to blend in with the rest of the workers. If you get caught, I can't help you. Another thing, if any other workers ask for assistance, it's best you just do as they say, despite what you were forced to do. Very well, but remember our agreement. Find a map and get it to me. I'll work on getting on Rainbow Dash's good side, but not the way other Pegasi had to. I'll get one. I nodded my head as another thought came to me. By the way, what time is it? If you're wondering if the factory is shut down, fortunately for you, it is. The shift's just barely ended, but that doesn't mean we're safe. We need to get out of sight, so I guess I'll take you to my custom room that Dash gave me, once she gained my trust. By the way, I never caught your name. I panicked. I tried to think of a fake name, seeing if I gave her my real name, she'd recognize it immediately. Through my struggling, I remembered what Crystal had said about the unnamed Pegasus I had spoke to. He had forgotten his name. I forgot mine, long ago. I stated, hoping the worker would buy my bluff. She raised an eyebrow, showing that she didn't believe me. Don't give me that bullshit. You assaulted me out of nowhere, so you somehow got into the factory. Tell the truth and don't lie. I knew I couldn't lie again, so I came up with a fake name close to my real one. Fine. It's Scoots. The Pegasus gave me a strange look, placing her hoof to her chin. That's better. Huh. Strange. Dash used to mention some ponies she used to call Scoots for short. I cussed in my mind, knowing I wasn't getting anywhere with her. Here I was in the place I had died originally, about to die again unless I found some way to persuade this worker otherwise. Luckily, I managed to do so. I forgot my name long ago, so I just refer to myself as Absentia. I recognized the word Absentia immediately. It matched any pony who had lost their identity perfectly. The word Absentia is a reference to being forgotten, left behind, absent from where some pony originated. Every pony's name in this factory had gone absent long ago through the countless years of killing innocent Pegasi. A sad thought that I couldn't fathom. Let's get out of here, before we get caught by security. I agree. Let's go. As we turned to leave, I had no idea what to think. Had I just entered a trap with Absentia? Had I just made a mistake by making a deal with a factory worker? All I knew was that I wasn't safe in any way. If anything, I needed to watch my back. I was in the Rainbow Factory, where fears and horrors come true, and not a single soul gets through. I was in hell. Nowhere was safe.